Today is June the 3rd, and today I want to talk to you about what is most important to me and why I do what I do. I'm a lawyer, and in my practice of law, I have done a number of things that solved problems that were given to me in a legal sense. I once represented a survivor of Auschwitz against those who denied the Holocaust, and we filed a case and won that case, and it was recognized that it was just simply a fact of history that the Holocaust occurred. But in doing that, I, in my own mind, was responding to a dream I had had a year before when I was in Jerusalem. And in that dream, I felt a drive that I had to represent the children of the Holocaust, because that was the greatest sin of all those who participated in that killing machine that was operated during World War II, as they seek to atone for their sins, because the death and murder of those children was why I did the Holocaust case, and I argued in that case in the courts in Los Angeles. I asked, if it is true that this just simply never took place, then where are all of the children? That's what I asked. Where are the children? And I said, they disappeared. An entire generation or more of children were murdered and slaughtered because they simply couldn't work, and they were just simply put to death. And that is the absolute fact of the matter. And from that was why I represented the children. Not only just the Jewish children, but the gypsy children that were just simply put to death one day. And in all of that, I, in my practice of law, I have sought as best I can to define the meaning and use of the law as I was given particular problems to solve in a legal sense. And among the things that I did at or near the same time that I did the Holocaust case was that I filed a class action lawsuit directly in the United States Supreme Court on behalf of every citizen of the United States Supreme Court, saying that our government at that point in time was under the control of special interest groups and not the people of this country. And I asked as a remedy to be imposed by the court on the other two branches of government who were named as the defendants in that case, Jimmy Carter and the Congress. And I ask that we have as a remedy, that we have a national policy referendum, that we, if we're smart enough to pay taxes and to die in the wars that, that have to go into the operation of this country and this government, that we should at least have the right to vote on the most critical issues facing the country. Every 4 years when we vote for president, why aren't we given the 12 most critical questions, the true questions that this new president is going to have to address once this new president is in office and tries to assemble a government? And that was the argument I made at that time, and the court did not hear my petition, of course, but I'm told, I didn't see the article, that there was once an article that reviewed the 10 most interesting cases, that the court considered during that term. But, and to get on with the story, I suppose, that I undertook at that time something that I am here to discuss today. In other words, what brings me to this moment is the most important thing to me today are the children who are dying in these horrible wars that are being fought all over the world. All over the world is at war. We are at war because almost in every country and in every jurisdiction, the countries are armed and contending with neighbors around them or other political powers that dominate over them to respond militarily to all of the problems. And that's the destruction of the world. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. If we continue doing what we're doing militarily, we have no future as a humanity, because we will then be on a downslide from this moment that we are today. Because where we are today is a wonderful and magnificent and incredible humanity to be a part of. But we have to look at this concept of war, and what it does is that it generates the manufacture of weapons. And what it does is that when we address another country, such as, let's say, North Korea at the moment, and we are saying to North Korea that you either do what we tell you we're going to do, or we're going to attack you. We're just going to obliterate you. I mean, that's what we said, and after 9/11, we told Pakistan that they either supported us in all that we did, or we would just simply obliterate them. I mean, these are the kinds of threats that were made a crime against humanity at the end of World War II, because those who tried to organize the world politically, peacefully after World War II, looked at the idea that we had to have organization and peaceful means of rectifying the issues that arise between nations and people, and that occurred. And that is why I can sit here in Long Beach, California, taking a few minutes of my day before I go out and do all of the things that I, like everybody else, have to do in a day. I can take a few minutes and discuss with you what is most important to me. And I must say that it must be of the most importance to every single one of you who hear what I have to say, that war kills children. War kills children. And what I say today is that just as I represented the children of the Holocaust in the Holocaust case, and I've done other things that I've done in what some people call the adventures of Billy Jack, because the things I do are of interest to me. When I have a problem, it becomes of interest to me. For example, let's say you ask me questions about a range of things that are occurring. And I would probably mostly say, take a look at my books. What I've done is that whether it's China or Iran or political policy or the other things that could be of issue, as I have thought about these, almost as a Newtonian philosopher, as I think about problems, I look to see if there are reasonable solutions legally and practically. And I then write all of this out, and then I put it out of my head, and I really don't have to think about it all that much anymore. And I approach the things that I do from a matter of policy, that what we have to do is we have to take a big, broad view of things instead of just getting in at the moment without hesitation or thought and getting ourselves into more difficult situations than we're already in. With that, I want to say that I represent today, in my mind, let me start with the children of Gaza. Let me start with the children of Gaza and say at this moment that based upon everything I know, based upon every bit of scientific research that exists at this moment, the children of Gaza have an equal blood right to the ancient land of Israel as any other occupier of that nation today. That's just simply a fact, that by DNA evidence, it can be clearly shown that the children of Palestine, have the original blood right in Palestine, and have been there occupying it ever since the destruction that occurred 2,000 years ago, and that nation ceased to exist at that point. But that said, the children of Gaza are but one. But what about the children of Iraq? The children of Iraq, we went to war against Iraq after we had mitigated to a certain extent the threat in Afghanistan, and we went to war against a nation on trumped-up evidence. It's a matter of history. It's acknowledged openly, even to this day, and so therefore its consequences, and from that consequences is everything that's existing in the Middle East today. The entire Syrian war, where we are sitting there confronting a nuclear-armed, quote-unquote, enemy, Russia. Or why are we doing this? Why aren't we trying to solve problems today? Why must we inflame every single incident into being a warlike, bellicose response? It makes no sense at all. It makes no sense at all if we, the human beings that occupy the earth today, are all at one, a united and intertwined species that has as its essence our ability to think. I mean, look at around. This is the study I work in. These are the books I read. These are the thoughts I have. And in today's world, I'm able to share those with you. And, if you go to my personal website, if you look there, there's a lending library. All of my books are there and available. All of my articles are there. Many and most of my videos are there. It's my photographs that provide the slideshow at that website, and also the USVRA and Y4VRA websites. I've also added another website, which also speaks to what we're saying today about war and children. This is another one of the true stories that in 1980 I ran for president of the United States. I ran a write-in candidate for president of the United States against Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter. And it was really on the basis of policy, because I had faulted Jimmy Carter's policy in terms of Iran saying, release the hostages so that we can leave. I always advocated that he should say, this is our home under international law, under Islamic law, this is our home, please leave. And just take that as the policy and work in that direction rather than go to war against these people. So in 1980, what I said was that the policy of the United States should be that we would never again make war against a people or a nation, that we would instead use a police model. My history and background is I'm a police officer. I wrote policy for the police in the 1960s and 70s. And my approach to these kinds of problems is a law enforcement, but a professional law enforcement, the very best of law enforcement, not the bigoted cop who might overreact and abuse his discretion and power, but the true sense of law enforcement in a peaceful society in which we ourselves police ourselves. And we do so at the lowest level possible and resist federalization of law enforcement particularly. And that is my approach in 1980. So I said, we will never again make war against a nation or a people again, but instead, if the president is convinced that someone like Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi or Kim in North Korea or some other petty dictator in some ways represents a threat to the United States, then we make our case to Congress, and Congress issues an arrest warrant for this person, which simply means that this identified person is an outlaw. Is outside of the law. So as we deal with that country within the law, that person then becomes identified as someone who is outside the law in our minds, even within the country where he or she may be. And what that means is that at the same time you file a complaint in the World Court of Justice in which you demand that particular individual show personally in court and defend his or her government, before the World Court of Justice as being a threat to the rest of the world. These are things that can be done quickly and easily because it's just simply a matter of policy. We have to realize that we are wasting billions and billions and billions of wasteful armaments every day. You know, the last thing I did, which, by the way, you know that I lost the election in 1980, but I did drive up the coast in my car, and I checked into a hotel adjacent to the Holiday Inn where the world news media had gathered at the foot of the mountain when Ronald Reagan was just being installed as president up above all of us. And I went there and checked in, and then I drove over to the Holiday Inn, and I went to the bar because nothing was happening. And here was the world's news media to the extent that it was represented in the bar that day. And I held my final press conference of the election in which I conceded the election and did not demand a recount. But on my way out, I stopped by the press office at the Holiday Inn there, and I left a personal letter that I had written in my hotel room that morning to President Reagan. And in it, I said simply this, you know, as we're looking at the power of the Soviet Union at this point, as you're wanting to increase our power to overcome the threat of the Soviet Union. And I said, you know, before you do that, you know, many of their missiles may not be all that real or work all that well. You know, maybe you ought to go kick a few tires before you make a purchase in terms of buying wasteful weapons. I don't remember exactly what I said. I would treasure it if his library preserved any of the papers from that time. I would be interested in seeing what I said at that time. That's my recollection as best I recall. But we know that there was, in fact, a gigantic buildup. The Soviet Union did, in fact, collapse. I don't know that it was that direct of a result. I think that it would have happened in the same way, probably, even because of the worldwide spread of information had just simply overwhelmed the Soviet Union. There was too much knowledge and information coming in from the West to control the population like that. And the oligarchs had to take control, and they did. And so we are here confronting a very complex world if you look at it from a larger view. And, you know, we are, you know, the resurgent Soviet Union, and now Russia, with President Putin clearly in control, does in fact represent a threat, not necessarily because of its military threat, but the fact that its military threat is in the control of perhaps I don't want to say a gangster reign. It is just that there is endemic crime within Russia at a very high level, and leave it at that. But you know, on the other hand is our relationship with China, and to a certain extent, China, Japan, and Korea are all really interrelated, because actions we took back in the past have produced the results that are on the table today when we look at these nations in the forms of governments they have. And you know, as we are getting ready, preparing for negotiations with North Korea, you know, it is well that we accept our role in producing the sentiments that will be brought to that table by the other side. Because, you know, here's a reality of history. I dedicate a chapter in the China book to what happened with the United States and the nation, the Kingdom of Korea, that existed at the turn of the 20th century. And we, in terms of making our peace treaties with the nations of Asia at that time, entered into a mutual defense treaty with Korea, with the Kingdom of Korea. And in doing so, we guaranteed them at a very high level. And then as Japan began to encroach upon and threaten and begin its invasion of Korea, we did nothing. as diplomatically, we did nothing, even though we were. It isn't. What it is diplomatically, it is an international shame that we allowed Japan to then invade and occupy and colonize Korea during all the years that they did. That said, we then have to move forward if we're looking at Korea to the end of World War II, when, again, as the result of our inaction, when Japan invaded Manchuria and then into northern China, we and the rest of the world did not come to the defense of these countries, which had World War II may not have ever occurred to a certain extent, because our inaction there also encouraged Hitler and Mussolini in doing what they did in Europe. So we have to look at the consequences of our actions. And one of them is, let's look at the end of World War II, where all of these forces are coming to bear, with the Soviet Union coming in, with China now teetering entirely toward Mao's communism, that we had to deal with that situation. And we did so by dividing Korea between the forces of Russia and China and South Korea and the United States in the form of the United Nations, and so we went to war there as a police action on behalf of the United Nations. So my question today is, why is the President of the United States negotiating an end to a United Nations action? I mean, I don't know. It seems to me that that if we are in fact at the table threatening to devastate North Korea, then let's remember that we did it once. In the Korean War, the United States bombed North Korea to oblivion. It leveled every single city, every single building, every single village, until the head of the Air Force simply said, there are no longer any targets left to bomb. There are no two bricks, one on top of the other, in all of North Korea. So let us now for a second imagine how many thousands and thousands of them were children. Right? Well, there we are. That's what we're talking about today. War kills children, and that is inhuman. That is a violation of our human rights as people all over this world. The thing we share today is that we are the people. We are under governments at different places under different conditions. But to the extent that there is any validity in those governments, they are by the consent of the governed. By whatever form of law that it is then organized, it is because the people consent to be governed under those conditions. And that is what I believe as a matter of philosophy. You ask me, why do I do what I do? Well, I do this because of my underlying philosophy. It is a clear fact that I have, in doing the things that I have done, I have approached it from a spiritual point of view, and that is the subject actually of a book that is unpublished, but it is ready to be published as a book on the history of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and is an attempt to get to the very bottom of the law of that ancient land. And I basically take it back to a further point in time when Abraham first came into the promised land, before he was ever taken to Egypt, and perhaps centuries or more before Moses appeared with the Levites to impose the Ten Commandments on the Israeli people. But going back to that point in time when Abraham had to go rescue some of his kinfolks from surrounding kings, and he returned and was succored. He was given relief and blessing by the king of Jerusalem, who is the king of righteousness. That is the translation of it. But at Jerusalem, Abraham came there and gave a tenth of the of the booty that he had just collected in his war, and gave that to the king of Salem, Jerusalem, Melchizedek. And there is the essence of the law from which all other law in the Bible flows, because what that is that it is righteousness. It is the concept of righteousness. And the way it works is this, is that the one who, the actor, knows whether the act is done in a righteous way. And the person on the other side of the action also knows whether it was done in a righteous way. It's not a complicated set of laws. And in fact, in the book that I am preparing, I draw upon my work in publishing the Dead Sea Scrolls and the work of others such as Elaine Pagels in the Gnostic Gospels. And I try to bring together, as best I can, from a lawyer's point of view, what truly happened 2,000 years ago, as best we can know and understand from the books that we now have, which include the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Gnostic Gospels, among others. But so essentially, what it is that the philosophy that flowed from all of that is that we have to act and live in a way that doesn't harm others. That we seek the gentle path instead of the warlike path. We will, what we have and we have achieved today. If you can share with me this moment that what is being sent to you in terms of this video has gone through so very many electronic processes that it is truly magical, and that we can do that at a time when a boy was born and we had workhorses and we didn't have indoor plumbing and we used kerosene lamps, and that is the world I was born into. And I've been fortunate to live these 77 years now, and to be at this point to say that I am acting today for the children of Iraq, the children in the Holocaust case, the children of Gaza, the children of Palestine, the children wherever they may be in these crazy wars that are being fought with these horribly violent, human-killing weapons, has to cease. It just simply has to stop. And we can do that as a matter of policy. We do not have to make war against other nations to achieve what is best for our people and the other people on this fragile earth that we share. And it is fragile. I mean, if we don't understand and take steps quickly to begin to deal with the ecological changes that are taking place in our environment, we are going to lose large portions of our infrastructure and creations to the elements. And what are we going to do then? How many more hurricanes is it going to take before we realize that the government is incapable of solving all of these ills? How are we going to accommodate migrations of people on this earth who essentially have to respond to the environment around them? If there is no longer any water, we only survive a few days. So with the migrations for water and for food and for safety and security, the only way that can be provided is that we move forward. How do we do this? Well, what if today, the entire defense industries that exist in all of the nations, whether it's here, Russia, Sweden, Israel, other nations that produce armaments and sell them to other countries, that what we can realize is that just as at the end of World War II in the United States, all of those factories that had been turning out jeeps and ships and tanks and all of those things just turned out big old huge cars that ran on lots of gas, and the economy boomed as we began to move through the centuries that followed, or I'm sorry, the decades that followed World War II. And so for me, the philosophy that guides me is this little book, the Book of Mindkind. And I, again, if you want to ask me what my philosophy is, I'd say this is it. Speaking today on the subject of war and on behalf of the children, I have to make one last statement, and that is that I also represent the children of our immigrants who are being ripped from the arms of their parents at our borders. This is an act against humanity. This is a violation of the international law. It cannot be allowed to continue. It just simply requires a presidential decision. And who speaks for the children? Who speaks for the children? We all must speak for the children, because the children are our future. And with that, I have to say I have nothing really further to say philosophically or politically today, except that this is why I do what I do. I have my work to continue to do today, and I have, in some respects, substituted this, which is the third video cast, or VCast, in which I try to, in some ways, use something more than 240 characters of the English language to convey some very compelling commentary. I think it's compelling because these are real problems, and you can't deal with these real problems in just news flashes. It requires real, thoughtful, mature consideration, and that is what we are asking to the extent that we do this in a plural way, that we all be allowed to vote in November, and that we have a national discussion about this vote as to whether we have the right to vote. I mean, that's the question. Do we have the right to vote effectively to control our country? That's the question. And I propose that it would be a magnificent debate between now and November, and that the leadership that we produce in November will be vastly different than the leadership we will produce if things are allowed to continue as they seem to be going, with partisan political party bickering, and it is just an ugly, ugly political scene. But I, as always, continue to believe in the American people. I think that we are a representative of every people and nation and society and culture on earth, that the world looks to us for leadership, and that we have the ability to demonstrate that leadership, both in the young people of this country who can organize together quickly in ways that we can't even begin to imagine or understand, but the women of this country who can provide. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of women in this country who are knowledgeable and running significant operations, who could easily and quickly form the committees of correspondence, a modern committees of correspondence, such as what truly allowed us to prevail in the Revolutionary War. It wasn't necessarily that Washington fought all these battles. It was just that he kept the army alive while the committees of correspondence kept the concept of an independence alive throughout the colonies. And today I think that the women of America could form committees of correspondence and could easily direct any activities toward getting out the vote, so that we vote one way or another. Either on the ballot in November, we vote as to whether yes or no on the Voters' Bill of Rights, or we do it on the internet. And either way, it will produce a result, that we engage in the debate, and that we are invested in the consequences. Because the decisions we make between now and November are critical. These are very critical decisions. I mean, the entire future of our country and humanity on earth is really dependent upon it, because we have to deal with these problems of the environment and our infrastructure and our organization in order to survive peacefully. And if we can't do that, then of course we, along with any other species that fails to prevail, will die off. And someday, perhaps another species, I often think perhaps it'll be the raccoons, they have clever little hands, will look down and say, who were they? And what did they stand for? That's the question. What do we stand for in the United States? Are we to stand for the killing of children in our name, which is taking place all over the world today? There are wars being fought today by a force of military that comes directly under the control of the President of the United States. President Trump commands a joint special forces force of thousands and thousands of special force secret troops that can go anywhere in the world and do whatever they are directed to do by the President of the United States, acting through his national security advisor. And that today is a man who was instrumental in implementing the illegal war against Iraq. So, on that note, I think that's all I have to say today, except speak out, register, vote, defend your rights of liberty. Defend your rights of liberty. And the only way you can do that is through your vote.